So, hello, my name is Michal Tresner, and I would like to share a couple of my thoughts and experience with the banking security, and mainly in a fraud detection space. I'm also a co-founder of Threatmark company that I will just briefly introduce at the end of the presentation, hopefully. But let me open this presentation with a little question. What do you think that those three gentlemen have in common? Anyone? Okay, I will help you with the answer.
It's very hard to recognize his face.
That's true. Yeah, they are not fraudsters. They are just workers. But they knew that there is some risk associated with the job that they try to perform. So they were naturally looking for some protection tools, some protection equipment. And I think you all know that they might feel secure now, but actually this is just a false feeling of security or safety, as you are probably also aware of. And I have the exact same feeling when talking to banks about security and especially about fraud detection. And I will tell you why. I will tell you a short story about a bank. It's a fairly large bank in Central Europe. It's also part of a quite large European banking group that has 3 letters in their name. And this bank started to experience a first banking malware attacks somewhere around 2014. And because this bank has already paid quite a lot of money for Gartner for access to their portal and access to the analysts, they were trying to look for financial malware detection solutions using a Gartner analysis. For those that don't know what a financial malware is, just a short introduction. Financial malware is kind of a remote access Trojan that will try to, let's say, steal some credentials from the user's computer, and maybe also, some malwares can do that, also transfer the money to the fraudster's account. And the early malware campaigns worked in a way that they injected some HTML code into the existing HTML page of the bank, and this is exactly how it looked. They basically asked the user for some additional information, or they sometimes even asked him to download a malware component to their mobile phone, which was of course advertised as some security component from the bank. And it was quite hard to identify for a normal user because it was perfectly okay session with the green banner on top. Everything looked legitimate because the malware was already on the computer injecting that code in the website of the bank on that computer. So these kind of attacks started, for that bank at least, in 2014. And the bank implemented a solution recommended by Gartner. It was a solution from a big company, also with 3 letters in their name and a blue logo. And because they paid quite a lot of money for first year for implementation of that solution, they also wanted to know if this solution is really working well and if they're really secure. So they turned to an independent security consultancy company, basically a group of security experts that I had the luck to work for at that time. And this company, including me, tried to attack the software and try to validate if it really provides the protection it says it provides. Unfortunately, for the 3-letter company, we were able to bypass the solution in about 2 days, and that was not the worst thing. The worst thing was that we were even able to amplify the attack against the bank through that security solution. So it was really a disaster, and we created a report full of red vulnerabilities, and we reported that to the bank. And the bank was not really caring. They did not care much about that, but only up until the moment when there was another malware campaign, and this time the malware writers realized that they can also bypass the security solution that they already implemented. So they started to have a really successful attack, and the money started to lose a lot of money from, of course, the accounts of the users. But they paid that money to the users because they don't want to be sued by the users. So the company, the bank, started to lose money, and they turned back to the security consultancy company to help them with some solution And we created a solution that was basically able to identify infected computers in a matter of weeks. The bank deployed that solution, and they also removed the solution from the three-letter big company. So this could be an end of the story. It could be a happy end of the story. But unfortunately for us, it was not the end. Because the fraudsters, they felt that the bank is already protected, and they turned away from the bank. So the bank thought, okay, we don't have any attacks anymore, so let's remove the solutions that we have. So they also removed our solution at that time. But it did not take too much time, and there was a new wave of attacks, but this time without any malware or any tools. It was purely a phishing attack, basically using social engineering techniques to persuade users to hand over the credentials for their accounts or even perform the transactions on behalf of the attacker. This time the bank already knew that they should consult Gartner, and they picked something that is called brand protection services. It did not help them much, but it was even worse later when PSD2 regulations started to be recognized in the industry. And the bank realized that they need to have something that is called transaction risk analysis system. Basically some system that looks at the transactions and tries to evaluate if it's a fraudulent transaction or not. This time they also consulted Gartner, and they chose a different solution from a different company, but it has also 3 letters in their name. And they really bought it. So what do you think they bought? They bought exactly this: an old GPS navigation for a car. Actually, as you can see, and you might be aware of that, the old GPS is quite bulky. It would probably also kill you when you have a car accident. It's also expensive, or it used to be. The traditional systems are big. These are big, large analytical platforms. You need to have hundreds of servers to deploy them, hundreds of man-days of consulting companies to deploy that solution, and they are also very expensive. They are mostly offline, but most importantly, they lack enough information. They only look at the transaction level data. So they know that there is a transaction going to Russia, and it's a priority payment, and it's probably sending more than 70% of your account balance. So this could be probably a fraudulent transaction. But this is quite often not the case, and it only creates false positives. Also, they are mostly outdated. So these solutions are, let's say, 10 years in one bank, and they are never updated by the vendor. They don't know about any new attack, past behavior, past frauds, and this is all bad. And also, if there is an attack in one bank, the other bank on the same market will never know about it unless they really share the information. But of course, it's not in real time. And this is what we are trying to change. So what I think you need and what other banks need is something like a Waze, but this time, of course, for fraud prevention. So how many of you is using the old navigation that I showed before? No hands? Everyone is using Waze for navigation? Okay, hopefully you do. And you should do it for fraud detection as well. So just to put it into context, Waze is lightweight. It's almost, I think it's already free. You can have live updates of the map. You always have shared information about the traffic. You can share information with other users. So if you click to report that there is a policeman standing on the road, or there is a traffic accident, this information is automatically shared with other users. Sorry. So they can benefit from that. And this is called shared intelligence. Also, it's based on machine learning, and it has much more data than just the data about the roads. And it's fully managed, so you don't need to care about anything. And this is exactly what it needs to be for fraud detection. You don't want to deploy that. You don't want to take care of the maintenance. You need the company to do it for you. There might be even good companies with 3 letters. But you already know what you really need is a modern approach to modern threats. Most of the current solutions are more than 10 years old. Some are even 20 years old. And they are really responding to the old types of fraud and old types of attacks. And you also don't need to look for single-purpose solutions, because if there is any problem, you should not focus on that problem. You should put it in a context and know what might come, and let's say in 2 years. So you need something much more complex, an analytical platform that looks at the complex behavior of the users. But now let me tell you about PSD2. How many of you are aware of PSD2 regulation from European Union? Okay, good. How many of you are from banks? Not much? Not many? Okay, then if you are from bank, then you would know. PSD2 is a regulation from European Union that you are not part of yet, but it will probably come to you as well one day, because it's not only European Union, it's basically part of open banking initiative that is active all around the world. What it essentially says that if you're a bank, now you have your proprietary interface, such as web application or mobile application, and your users are using that interface to access the bank. But as European Union wants to make the whole industry more open, they will force you to open your interface using, let's say, a public API or set of APIs, so that any third party can, let's say, use their interface to connect to your system as a bank, and then any user can use any interface to connect to their account in the bank. So it's really like bank will lose control over their interface, which is the most important thing here. And let me tell you now what the PSD requires you as a bank to have. It needs to, or you need to perform something that is called the real-time transaction risk analysis or transaction scoring. I was quite surprised when talking to banks how many of them don't have any real-time transaction scoring capabilities. They're running some batch processing on transactions that are 24 hours old, and this is quite common. So they are not able to stop the transaction in real time. And this needs to change, not only because PSD2, but also because of instant payments. Also, you need to have an ability to detect signs of financial malware and also some fraudulent scenarios and fraudulent schemes. You also need to profile behavior profiling, provide behavior profiling of a user in terms of the devices that he uses, in terms of the activities that he performs, and some other things. And you should be able to detect automated access to your existing interface. This is basically how the whole ecosystem is now working before the PSD2 regulation. Basically, all the third parties are there already, and they're using automated robots to scrape data from the banking interface. And this is how it works now. And also, you should report to the regulator. So now tell me, or let me tell you what the Gartner thinks about what you need for fraud prevention. You definitely need the whole set of features for your fraud prevention system to be really effective. But most of the banks currently have only the first and the second stack. And in order to be really effective, you should also add endpoint profiling, behavior analytics, user interface detection and protection, and as a holy grail, you need to be able to continuously assess the risk associated with every user accessing your system. Gartner also says that you should have a system that is capable of providing some advanced machine learning capabilities to detect fraud and security threats. But quite important thing is that the deep learning that is on the top is not always suitable for fraud detection. By the way, deep learning is that kind of machine learning, the advanced machine learning that you probably encountered already for self-driving cars or any image recognition tools and things like that. So anything that you felt, okay, wow, this is amazing, was based on deep learning. But actually, deep learning is not suitable for fraud detection, because fraud detection in banks is quite heavily regulated, and you need to be able to provide an audit trail of the decision. So you need to be able to track what was behind the decision, if the transaction should be blocked or not. And this is what deep learning quite often cannot provide, because the machine learning mechanism behind that is not always disclosing the way how it decided. So in our solution, we decided to use ensemble of methods or models, which is basically a combination of the models based on machine learning that works best for some particular situation. So by now you are aware of the fact that I represent a company that is more like a vase than just like a traditional GPS navigation. And this is what we basically have. It's the most complex behavior profiling and threat detection system for online channels in order to prevent any kind of online fraud and cyber threat. Mostly targeted on online banking, but can be used in basically protection of any online business. So the essential question that we always ask is, when you access the online channel, is it really you? Because if it's not you, then it might be a fraudster who tries to perform some activity on behalf of you. And these are the parameters that we, or some of those parameters that we try to check for each user, each session, to validate that it's really the user who he claims to be. So for example, we know, or we try to know, if there is a financial malware or any kind of threat inside the computer of the user, if the device that the user is using is the device that we have seen previously for that user. Time and location of the user access is also put in a context, like, is it really the location that the user used before when performing such action or sending such transaction? So we try to put those information into a context, and this will create a behavior profile of a user. So anytime there is an attacker that tries to, let's say, perform some activity, he will always break some of the parameters, and this is measurable by the system and can identify a stolen identity. We also perform some quite amazing things, such as the things that we call behavior biometry, which is basically ability to understand how you interact with your device, such as what is the typing cadence on a keyboard, how do you hold the mouse, how do you hold your device if it's south, west, or something like that. How do you type, or how do you, let's say, swipe on a touch screen. And also how you interact with the online web interface, such as, for example, what is the angle that you typically enter the login button, what is the speed that you click or double click on a button, how do you, let's say, hover over the elements, how do you scroll on the page, how do you navigate inside the interface, and things like that. And these are literally hundreds of parameters that basically describes each and every single person, and any attacker will always break some of those parameters, and that will of course be used to identify that he's a fraudster. The system works in layers, so even if you just open up the web application or open up the mobile application, we start to perform some analysis. So we look for device malware, we look for connection parameters, we try to identify the device. So we know that, for example, this device has been previously seen with a different customer, and now it's the first usage for that customer that we are protecting. But we already know the history of the device, and we know that it was used for some fraudulent behavior in past. So this kind of information are, let's say, analyzed at the beginning. Then, of course, user is trying to log on, so we validate, let's say, if the time and geolocation of the access is typical for the user, or if, for example, there is no, let's say, velocity problem, like he moved 100 kilometers under 3 seconds, because now we see him now in Belgrade, and before we, let's say, we saw an access to the same interface under this identity from Vienna or some other city. And then when the user navigates throughout the application, we still monitor the user. So it's something like a continuous authentication, because at any moment in time, we can say that, okay, this is not the user anymore. It's an attacker who just took over the session using some remote access tool, for example. And this is very important, because this is a kind of attack that happens for online banks. And at the moment when the user performs some kind of active operation, such as transaction, for example, we analyze the transaction level data as well. So we know that this user is typically paying to that account. It's probably a utility account, and the amount is, let's say, something typical for the user. So this is all put in a context, and when we look at that from the higher perspective, we are able to really decrease the false positives that other systems have because they are only looking at the transaction level data. So a summary would be that it's a modern approach. It's really an innovative, user-centric approach. So we try to look at the identity first, and then the rest of that. It's fully GDPR compliant, and it has some quite unique features, such as behavior profiling I told you about, but also the global device intelligence, which is basically capability to understand that the user is, let's say, moving across our customer base, and we can still track him. And also it has some real-time application protection capabilities, such as, for example, if it's implemented on a mobile phone, for example, in a mobile banking, we are able to see that the attacker is trying to hack the mobile bank, for example, run it in an emulator or try to extract it from the phone, put it into some different phone, and things like that. So this will also allow you to understand the whole context of the activities that you see in the interface. And it's compliant with PSD2. It basically allows bank to be compliant with PSD2. And most important thing is that we don't aim to replace any existing transaction risk analysis in the bank if they are satisfied with that. We try to increase the effectiveness of that existing system. And one of the other use cases could be, for example, that if bank is using SMS OTPs, like second factor, sent to a mobile phone as a text message, we are able to decrease the amount of SMS messages being used by 90% by applying this real-time behavior profiling. And that will, of course, increase the user experience for the users, and will also decrease the cost for SMS messages that the bank needs to pay to the operator. There is just one slide about the Threatmark itself. The company is very innovative. Right now it has more than 30 people. Most of them are technical people based on that look mainly to the machine learning, programming, and things like that. Also, some of them are coming from ethical hacking industry. And the solution is already deployed in major European banks. We are mostly active in Central Europe, so Czech Republic, Slovak Republic, Poland. And we are also expanding worldwide through our worldwide partners. So we have first implementations in Egypt, Indonesia, and other countries. So you need to face the risk every day. So try to be clever and get us in the next room for some demo. Thank you.